stone is expensive. However, pallet wood off the side of the road is absolutely free. So what we're going to have a look at today is how to make a stone wall look like this, or a stone looking wall like this, out of pallet wood for nearly free. Okay, so I've broken up my pallet and I've got this really nice pile of oddly shaped pieces in front of me here. And what I've started to do is lay them out on this offcut of plywood, which I'm using as my backing board. So I'm kind of like jigsawing them out in a combination of large and small pieces, some blocky bits, some sort of really odd organic shapes here just to sort of go in between. And it gives it that really nice, not too uniform look that these stone walls have. So the drier the pallet wood, the better. You know, the longer it's been out in the sun, the less moisture in it that's got in it, the better, because the more it's going to break up and snap into these really interesting shapes.
After I've laid out my pieces on the board, I'm simply using a liquid nails glue to glue them on. I sometimes find I have to use screws to secure some of the larger pieces. So now that we've got our board prepared, I'm going to mix up the paint, ready for painting it. So this is just white acrylic. It's housing paint, had some left over from a job, but this is probably what's going to cost the most for this job, because you will go through quite a bit of white paint to paint, you know, depending on the size of what you're wanting to do. So white acrylic housing paint, simple black acrylic as well, which we're just going to drop in there and mix up. The reason I do this pre-mix is because we want to come back to the white later and use it for brushing highlights. And now our paint's nearly ready for the last part of this mixture. Sand. I just went to the local hardware shop, building supplies, grabbed a bag of sand, dump that in, mix it in like so until it's nice and chunky. And here we are laying on the paint. Now you want to do this flat because this stuff goes on pretty thick and it will just run off if you ever try to do it standing up. So you want to lay your board flat and just splodge it on quite heavily, get it on the cracks, and also every so often just pile it up on flat surfaces just to give a little bit more three-dimension. Try to disguise the fact that it's just flat wood, because that'll dry nice and crusty and maintain that stony texture. Okay, once I've got pretty much a full coat on and it's still nice and wet, what I like to do is throw some more sand on it and then dab that in. That'll give you a nice fine texture on top of the lumpier texture you've got already. So there's the board with the first coat of paint on it and texture next to the finished board. As you can see, a bit of a difference there. One's looking nice and varied and organic and one's looking very flat. So now let's do something about that. So the first thing I'm doing is just brushing in some super watered down acrylic paint, just nice dark brown acrylic. It's like almost brown water basically. It's so watered down. And that's just going to get in all the cracks and nooks and crannies and help the brickwork stand out a bit better. If you get some on the brickwork itself, no, don't worry, in fact you can put some on there, just dab it around, because stone isn't all one colour, you want it to have a variety of colours and textures on there, and it's all going to get largely covered up by the more layers in the future anyway. So now we've added a bit of depth, let's add a bit of variety to the surface. All I'm going to do, a little bit of primer, grey primer, spray it on just to provide a bit of adhesion while it's still wet. Dirt. And rub it in. And that will stick to the paint. Most natural looking thing you can find in the garden to make your stone look like stone. Coming back again with some more acrylic paint. Basically just aiming for a really nice, this is with a cloth by the way, really nice variety of textures and colours on the surface. And then while it's still wet, you know what? More dirt. Basically all sorts of junk, dirt, natural stuff that might have piled up on these stones over time. As you can see, once you've dabbed, brushed, rubbed thrown dirt at it, and done all that process, the two boards are starting to match each other a little more closely. But as you can see, one still has more highlights than the other, and that's the dry brushing, which is what we're going to do now. Basically that's taking a nice soft brush with a bit of white paint on it, your white paint from before, and on a spare piece of wood, brushing off most of it. So you've just got a little bit of paint left on the brush. And then start lightly going over the top, just picking up all that finer detail and the edges. And as you can hopefully see, that's going to really make those boards stand out from the darker areas that we put in earlier. So hopefully you can see what a difference that's making on the bricks that already have dry brushing on them, as opposed to this side where I haven't done it yet. Much more texture, much more three-dimensionality. So I'm just going to go on and finish that off and then see how the two boards match. Okay, so those two boards are matching quite nicely now with the dry brushing finished. As always, it's a process of gradually building up your layers, dry brushing on the white, adding some more shadows, throwing on some more dirt. I've even mixed in a little bit of green there to suggest some moss growing, adding more highlights, more shadows, more dirt, until I'm happy with the finished result, which I am pretty happy with now.